At any given time, almost 12% of the active duty military is deployed to over 150 locations around the world. And today, approximately 3% have been infected by COVID-19. Despite being under siege in the hottest hotspot for infections in South Korea from the very beginning, in the city of Daegu, U.S. forces did not sustain their first infection until February 28th, when that installation on the front line fell. And by March 7th, the first infection in the Commonwealth of Virginia occurred on Fort Belvoir. It has been described by Ralph Northam, the nation's only physician serving as a state governor and former Army surgeon, as a biological war. And many have described a novel coronavirus as an invisible enemy. But currently, preparations are underway deputizing members of the D.C. National Guard and preparing to deploy a military force in the nation's capital equal in number to 2% of the active duty personnel in the entire military to support the inaugural ceremony of a political leader who claimed to be aligned with persons opposed to fascism. Persons who believed that America was never great. In an election year in which records were broken for participation, a pandemic pathogen was center stage, even eclipsing some of the candidates in press coverage as the news reported the rising infection counts for a pathogen out of control, apparently. In November, with the rejection of the president, many had claimed that science had prevailed, and now, as Joe Biden proceeds to the inauguration with plans to increase distribution of the newly developed vaccines, a traditionally peaceful transfer of power remains marred by controversy regarding tragic events recently at the Capitol, alleged to have been caused by armed insurrectionists, but with evidence of psychological operations ongoing throughout the events of the day. In a year of great civil unrest that had included rioting, looting, and arson. But just for a moment, as the nation transitions in leadership to a former candidate who often made the news by his confusion about where he was, it may be important for all Americans to ask some questions about where they will be after the inauguration is over. And probably the best reference to frame this inquiry is probably through the eyes of scientists, because geography is a science. It is a scientific fact that viruses are the most abundant biological particle in the world, and that despite their abundance with regard to posing any potential threat to mankind, by their mutation or discovery, no scientist credibly, prior to the present, ever designated viruses as a reason for concern, because by 2010, after the sudden emergence of MERS and SARS even, there were only 219 viruses known to be harmful to mankind. And that is simply the science. MERS and SARS, however, when viewed through the microscope of a scientist, raised concerns for several reasons. First, they had defied all probability by suddenly emerging, and in rapid succession, from what has been considered by scientists a non-threatening population of viruses. Second, they were both alleged to have been zoonotically evolved from bat coronaviruses, the largest family of viruses and the largest in physical mass, first discovered in animals in 1937 by medical researchers who managed to isolate one that was responsible for a type of bronchitis in birds and that had the potential to devastate poultry stocks. And later in the 1960s, in humans, coronaviruses were discovered in the noses of people who had presented with signs and symptoms of the common cold. Common signs and symptoms for common human coronaviruses include common cold symptoms and signs, such as runny nose, sore throat, headache, fever, cough, and general feeling of being unwell. Signs and symptoms very similar to those associated with COVID-19. According to the CDC, the common human coronaviruses can sometimes cause lower respiratory tract illnesses such as pneumonia or bronchitis. This is more common in people with cardiopulmonary disease, people with weakened immune systems, infants, and older adults. Medical researchers at the Mayo Clinic have concluded that as for the four human common coronaviruses, 229E, HKU1, NL63, and OC43, appear to be seasonal, often co-infecting with influenza, and with the lowest detection rates in summer and early fall, and the highest rates in winter and early spring. Researchers have discovered a dominance of infections in infants attributed to human coronaviruses identified as OC43 and NL63. According to one recent study describing human coronaviruses in general, coronaviruses are crown-like particles with spikes protruding from their surface. They are enveloped viruses with single-stranded positive sense RNA genomes of approximately 26 to 32 kb, which is currently the largest known genome size for an RNA virus. However, with regards to emerging threats of first SARS and then MERS, both of these zoonotically evolved bat coronaviruses found their origins in the People's Republic of China. The only location currently known to science for bat coronaviruses that are sufficiently similar to human coronaviruses to make zoonotic evolution possible. Also, the only location where a bat coronavirus has been found by scientists to be able to be cultured in a laboratory in vitro. And all of the bat populations that serve as hosts for these bat coronaviruses happen to be located in close proximity to a military virology research laboratory in China, of which there are at least two, possibly three. It is estimated that before COVID-19, and besides SARS and MERS, which largely presented no credible threat in America, despite press reports, and were primarily limited to outbreaks in nosocomial settings or hospitals, with no corresponding spread of community outbreaks in the surrounding communities. For those hospitals near Hong Kong, for SARS, a known place of political tensions in China, and in the Middle East for MERS. At least 30% of Americans have yet suffered infections from the other common human coronaviruses. They account for or contribute as co-infections in 15 to 30% of cases of the common cold, and have for many years, and CDC has identified four, for which they provide the following guidance. There is no vaccine to protect you against human coronaviruses, and there were no specific treatments for illnesses caused by human coronaviruses. Most people with common human coronavirus illness will recover on their own. Statement very, very similar to most of the cases of COVID-19. Despite their common presence and innocuous nature, it is of significance that no common human coronaviruses has an attack rate even close to the 20% threshold to be classified as an infectious disease. But rather than to demonstrate a secondary attack rate in studies as low as 4%, which alone would validate a conclusion that it was a common human coronavirus since the 1960s were being spread by some other unknown cause, but presented no lethal threat to cause any large amount of concern. It is of significance that neither SARS nor MERS was found to demonstrate a secondary attack rate even close to the 20% threshold to be classified as an infectious disease. It is of significance that the largest sample size tracer contact studies on COVID-19 failed to validate COVID-19 also as an infectious disease, finding a secondary attack rate less than 5%, only slightly higher than the 4% attack rate found among common human coronaviruses that are often co-infections presented in 15 to 30% of annual cases of the common cold. Large sample size tracer contact studies examining over 3 million laboratory confirmed cases of COVID-19 and their close tracer contacts have validated that infection spreads tend to be highly associated to cluster outbreaks tied to specific locations for COVID-19, and that the pathogen most consistently presents a secondary attack rate far below the 20% threshold to be classified as a communicable disease. And given the worldwide prevalence that today has been attributed to what is approaching over 400,000 fatalities in the United States alone, leading the world, the empirical results of multiple scientific studies confirm beyond a reasonable doubt that COVID-19 can only be described as a biological weapon of terror that has been deployed. And any person denying that fact is in fact denying what the results of clinical examinations have validated over and over and over again since the very beginning of this public health crisis. And Governor Ralph Northam has engaged in a pattern of obstruction of justice ever since April, when these facts were first presented in a challenge to the lockdown orders in the city of Alexandria, and evading the summons from the sheriff for that city. By and through his appointed Attorney General Mark Herring, Governor Northam continued this pattern of racketeering activity by evading service of a summons from the United States Marshal to avoid the personal jurisdiction of the Federal District Court in Richmond. As stated by the Supreme Court in the case against General Aaron Burr for treason in 1807, if the gentleman had believed this decision to be favorable to him, we would have heard of it in the beginning of his argument. For the path of inquiry in which he was led him directly to it. Interpreting the American Constitution, he would have preferred no authority to that of the Supreme Court of the country. Yes, sir, he would have immediately seized his decision with avidity. He would have set it before you in every possible light. He would have illustrated it. He would have adorned it. You would have seen it under the actions of his genius appear with all the varying grandeur of our mountains in the morning sun. He would not have relinquished it for the common law, nor have deserted a rock so broad and silent to walk upon the waves of the Atlantic. But he knew that this decision closed against him completely the very point for which he was laboring. Hence it was a decision was kept so sedulously out of view until from the excluded materials of the common law he thought he had reared a Gothic edifice, so huge and so dark as quite to overshadow and eclipse it. Let us bring it from this obscurity into the face of day. We who are seeking truth and not victory, whether right or wrong, have no reason to turn our eyes from any source of light which presents itself, and least of all from a source so high and so respectable as the decision of the Supreme Court of the United States. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for governor of Virginia. I ask every Christian, every conservative, every Republican, every Democrat, every liberal, every conservative, and every Virginian and American true to like the motto of the imagery. Follow me and we shall overcome. Honest. And y'all come back now. Yeah. In the shelter of your care each day. 'Cause I am a seeker and you are a keeper. You are the leader, won't you show me the way? I am a vessel that's empty and useless. I am a bad seed that fell by the way. I am a loser that wants to be a winner. And you are my last hope, don't turn me away. 'Cause I am a seeker, a poor sinful creature. There is none weaker than I am.
teacher, so reach down, reach out and lead me, guide me and keep me in the shelter of your care each day. 'Cause I am a seeker and you are a keeper. You are a leader, won't you show me the way? Oh, you're a mountain from which there flows a fountain. So let its water wash my sins away. 'Cause I am a seeker and you are a keeper. You are a teacher, won't you teach me the way? Reach out and lead me, guide me and keep me in the shelter of your care each day. 'Cause I am a seeker and you are a keeper. You are a leader, won't you show me the way? You are a leader, won't you show me the way? 'Cause I am a seeker and you are a keeper. You are a teacher, won't you teach me the way? Reach out and lead me, guide me and keep me in the shelter of your care each day.
This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
'Cause I am a seeker and you are a keeper. You are a leader, won't you show me